Hi guys. It's a beautiful day. I don't feel like being inside, so I came out here to work on my tan a little bit, hang out by the pool, and make this video for you. Sounds probably not all that good. Probably hear cars going by and my pool cleaner running, but I don't care. Because I'm going to do whatever I want, because I'm in charge. I've always been kind of a rebellious person. You may have figured that out by now. I don't see things the way other people see them, and I like to do things a little different way. Sometimes people want to have their own way for a lot of reasons. Sometimes they just want to be in charge of others and tell other people what to do. When we get to that situation, there's a argument over who's going to be in charge and who's going to be the leader and who's going to be the boss. You find these kinds of things throughout the Bible too. The question is, who is the boss and who is in charge, and why do you want to be? See, a lot of times people don't really want to be in charge so much as they just want to get their own way. I don't really want to be in charge of anything. I just want to be left alone to hang out here at my swimming pool. If I was really doing whatever I wanted, I'd be laying on a lounge chair right now, or out there yelling at the people next door that own a Harley to tell them to turn off all that noise. But that's the way it works. Now in God's kingdom, churches have divided and split and reorganized and everything else based on who's in charge and who's the boss. You guys have challenges in the same way in your youth group. Even if you either have a formal youth minister or you have moms that are kind of in charge. That's nice. Don't you think? The day I decide to come out here, that's what I get. Anyway, today's story is about control and who's in charge. And what it has to do with you depends on your personality. Most people fit somewhere in between these two extremes. Either they really want to be the kind of person that's in charge of everything, tells everybody what to do, or they really don't want any kind of control or power whatsoever. They just want to keep a low profile. Some people are very rebellious. They don't like anybody telling them what to do. They don't want to tell anybody else what to do, but they just don't want to be told. And so because of that, the challenge for you is to try to ask yourself, which kind of person are you? What kind of personality do you have? Because that'll tell a lot about what kind of temptations you face as we go forward. So we'll stop and take a break now. Spend a few minutes talking about what kind of tendencies you have. Do you tend to be the kind of person that wants to be in charge? Do you tend to be rebellious, or do you tend to be really cooperative with other people? Or do you just go along with whatever but everybody else says? What kind of person are you? Give that some thought, and then we'll come back. Then I'll tell the story of today, and then we'll have our little wrap-up thing at the end, if I feel like it. See ya. I'm going to read over parts of it and make comments on it, and hopefully you can stay with me on this. It's not a complicated story. It's pretty simple, but there are some interesting little points in there that if you want to get this and really apply it to your life, you need to pick up on some of these little elements that are in the story. Okay? Now, it begins with a man named Korah and who's a Levite, and some Reubenites. Reubenites are members of the tribe of Reuben, duh. And they're all the tribes that are there. But out of those, this guy Korah is the main ringleader. And as a Levite, of course, he's part of those people that are set aside. Remember, they were the ones that strapped on the sword, and they were with Yahweh, and Moses went in the golden calf incident, and they went around and killed a bunch of their brothers. And ever since then, they became God's special tribe that has different roles, and they get to carry the ark, and from them come the priests and all that sort of thing. So they're kind of a special group, and they camp right there, right around the tabernacle and all of that stuff. So they're kind of a special group. Now, here's the way the story goes. Korah and certain Reubenites, Dathan and Abiram and Eliab, anyway, a bunch of guys, became insolent and rose up against Moses. With them were 250 Israelite men, well-known community leaders, who had been appointed members of the council. Now, here's the first thing I want you to pay attention to, a little detail. These are not just radicals. These aren't rabble-rousers. These aren't crazy people. They're not kids. What they are is the leading men of the community. They've already been appointed to the council. They're already well recognized and well regarded, not only by their tribes, but by the nation of Israel in general. So when these guys rise up against Moses, it's not a small thing. It's not just some little band of malcontents or something. All right, here goes. They came as a group to oppose Moses and Aaron, and said to them, "You've gone too far. The whole community is holy, every one of them, and Yahweh is with them. Why then do you set yourselves above Yahweh's assembly?" When Moses heard this, he fell face down. Then he said to Korah and all his followers, "In the morning, Yahweh will show who belongs to him and who's holy, and he'll have that person come near him. You, Korah, and all of your followers are to do this. Take censers, and tomorrow put fire and incense in them before Yahweh. The man Yahweh chooses will be the one who is holy. You Levites have gone too far." Now I'm going to read on, and I'll put the next set of text up there, but I'm going to put pictures also of censers. Censers are, at least in our churches, they're not very familiar to us. They're usually brass or gold or silver. There's some sort of metal things with holes in them, and a lot of times they're hung by a chain or something, and you put incense in it, and you light the incense on fire, and then you swing them around, and the smoke fills up the room and makes everything smell really good and stuff. So I'll put pictures of that up there for you guys so you can see what a censer is. So this is kind of a weird thing, but Moses is telling Korah, bring your censer tomorrow, and we'll let God choose who's going to be in charge. We'll let God choose. Moses falls face down, very humble. Now, here's the next section, and watch this. Here's what Moses says to them now. "Listen, you Levites, isn't it enough for you that the God of Israel has separated you from the rest of the Israelite community and brought you near to himself to do the work at Yahweh's tabernacle and to stand before the community and minister to them? He's brought you and all your fellow Levites near himself, but now you're trying to get the priesthood too. It's against Yahweh that you and all your followers have banded together. Who is Aaron that you should grumble against him?" And it's this grumbling that will come about in the New Testament. If we get to this lesson, I'll show you where we are taught in the New Testament, don't grumble like they did in this story. And it has an impact on the way we behave in church. But notice Moses' point. Moses' point is, it's not Aaron you're grumbling against here. It's Yahweh you're grumbling against. You are grumbling against God himself. Even though they think, okay, Moses and Aaron, we're tired of you being in charge now. What they're really saying, and they don't really think of it this way because they're not thinking clearly, but since God appointed Moses and Aaron, what they're really saying is, we're tired of the way God is running things. We want to run things now. All right, story continues. Moses summoned Dathan and Abiram, but they said, we won't come. Isn't it enough that you brought us up out of the land flowing with milk and honey to kill us in the desert, and now you want to lord it over at us? Moreover, you haven't brought us to a land flowing with milk and honey or given us an inheritance of fields and vineyards. Will you gouge out the eyes of those men? No, we won't come. So those guys aren't going to come to the meeting because they don't believe God's going to do the sorting out. They think Moses and Aaron are going to set them up to do a trick and they're going to kill these guys. And the basis for their belief is that they left a land flowing with milk and honey. Egypt? They were slaves there. And then they say, and you haven't let us into a land of milk and honey, the promised land. Well, that's not Moses and Aaron's fault. That's the people's fault. These guys were part of the group that accepted the judgment of the 10 spies, not the 2. So these guys are whacked. But from their perspective, it kind of makes sense. They're kind of tired of Moses and Aaron. They're certainly tired of wandering around the desert all this time. Okay, story continues. Moses became angry, and he said to Yahweh, don't accept their offering. I haven't taken so much as a donkey from them, nor have I wronged any of them. And Moses said to Korah, you and all your followers are to appear before Yahweh tomorrow. You and they and Aaron, each man is to take a censer, put incense in it, 250 at all, and present it before Yahweh. So each man does that. Each man puts incense in his censer. And Korah got all his guys together. And then Yahweh says to them, okay, stand back from these guys. I'm gonna flame everybody. I'm gonna flame the whole community. It's the same sort of thing that God has threatened before. I'm going to torch all of Israel because I'm sick of putting up with these people. I'll start over using you or whatever, Moses. And so Moses begs again for them. No, God, don't kill everybody. You're not going to kill the whole community just because one guy is bad, right? And so God says, all right then, here's what I want you to do. Tell the assembly, move away from the tents of Korah, Dathan, and Abiram, the 3 main troublemakers. So now picture this. You get this sea of tents, and here's their tent with their families standing by each one. Their wives and their kids must have been just freaked out at this point, just going, oh man, what's going to happen next? Here's Dad standing there with this censer full of incense, and God tells everyone to step away from their tent. And so everyone backs up like this, and then you know what happens? Well, Moses says something, and this is what he says. He says, this is how you will know that Yahweh sent me to do all these things and that it wasn't my own idea. If these men die a natural death and experience only what happens to men, then Yahweh didn't send me. But if Yahweh brings about something totally new, and the earth opens its mouth and swallows them with everything that belongs to them and they go down alive into the grave, then you'll know that these men have treated Yahweh with contempt. And as soon as he quit saying that, the earth split open and their tents and everything fell right down like a giant sinkhole, and just earth swallowed them up. And you could hear the screams as they fell down into the thing, and everything that they owned. And everyone standing around there heard these screams of these guys as they got gulped down into the earth. And then, blam, the earth closes back up over them. That was it. They didn't exist anymore. And then, of course, the Israelites see this, and they hear the screams of horror as these guys fall down into the hole. And then they all start running away. Like, good grief, the whole camp is going to be swallowed up now. But it isn't. And so, here's what Yahweh says to Moses. Tell Eleazar, Aaron's son, the priest, to take the censers out of the smoldering remains. Oh, wait. Before the fire, right after the earth swallows them, then God sends fire shoots out from Yahweh and burns up the other 250 guys. And so what's left is a pile of smoldering ruin where there used to be people. And in the middle of this pile of burned rubble are the censers sitting in there. And so God tells him, he says, go in there and get those censers out, because those things are still holy. Get them out of the dirt and the smoldering ashes of what used to be these rebels, and pound them out and use them as a covering over the altar, so that everyone will remember from now on who's holy and who's not, and what to pay attention to and what not. Let them be a sign to the Israelites. So they did it, and Moses wrote, this is to remind the Israelites that no one except a descendant of Aaron should come to burn incense before Yahweh, or he would become like Korah and her followers. Okay, so guess what happens the very next day? I mean the next day. Everyone wakes up and they're scared, right? And they totally trust Moses? No. The very next day, they get up and they start grumbling against Moses again. Grumbling. Again with the grumbling. And they say, Moses did this. You've killed all these guys and you're no good. Well, what happens every single time we go through this? The same drill every single time. What happens is Moses gets upset. God gets upset. God says, I'm going to kill everybody. Moses cries out, please don't do that. Moses then sends Aaron to get his little censer, fill it with incense and fire from the altar in there. And Aaron runs out into the community. Well, it turns out that God this time started acting immediately. He said, I'm going to wipe out everybody. And he did start wiping out everybody. And his plague starts sweeping across through all of the people. Excuse me. And then Aaron runs out there with his little censer, like in the face of this plague sweeping across the thing. Aaron runs out there and he stops, and right between the dead and the living, and the plague stops. Because Aaron ran out there and interceded on behalf of God and Moses. And 14,700 people died because of that. It's like these people are just never going to learn. So here's what God says this time. He says to Moses, he says, I've got something I want you to do. I want you to go get everybody's walking stick, the staff, the rod, whatever, from the head of each one of the 12 tribes. Write their name on it and bring them in here to the tent and leave them overnight. And I'm going to put an end to this grumbling once and forever about who's in charge and all that kind of thing. And so they do. They bring in all 12 of their staffs or rods, whatever you want to call them. And the next morning, they look at all the staffs. They're all exactly the same except Aaron's. And Aaron's rod or staff has changed. It has, the walking stick thing has sprouted little shoots from it. The shoots have, which normally takes, weeks, months. The shoots have not only sprouted, but they've produced little green things. They've got blossoms on them. The blossoms have matured and have become bloomed and have become almonds. It's an almond branch. And it's already, in one night, produces almonds. And so that's why Aaron's rod gets put in the Ark of the Covenant, and it's there forevermore. Aaron's rod that budded. It's God's way of saying, this is my guy and nobody else. And you don't come near this tabernacle unless you're one of Aaron's descendants. Period. End of discussion. And of course, what do the people say? Oh no, we're all going to die. We're all going to die. It's interesting, but these people, even though it seems like they never learn, they have a lot in common with us. All right, well, there's the basic of the story. And I'll leave you now to go over the details of the story and see if you can set it firmly in your mind so that you have a picture of it. And then we'll get together outside and wrap it up. Talk to you in a minute. So the question is, who's in charge? If you paid careful attention to the story, then I suspect you will have discovered that it is God who is in control. God who's supposed to be in control. And if God's not in control, then it doesn't really matter who's in control. And also, if God's in control, it doesn't matter what kind of person is king or elder or priest, ruler. The simple fact is that all of us human beings, we simply serve a function. In our culture, we tend to think of the boss as the head man, he's in charge, or she's in charge, and we think of that person as being superior or better than other people. Maybe that person is older, maybe that person is a male instead of a female, or maybe the person is elected to some kind of office, or a dictator, or a school teacher, or whatever else. But we tend to think in terms of those people who are in charge as having the upper hand in some way, some sort of advantage. And if we have human-style leadership, then that's true. That's true. But in Moses' case, and in Aaron's case, God asked Moses to serve, and Moses didn't want the job. So Moses wasn't a leader in the sense that he wanted to boss people around. He couldn't care less. Remember back to the story when the people were grumbling because they wanted meat to eat? And Moses said, where am I going to get food for all these people? And he said to God, this is too much for me to handle by myself. And so before God even provided meat, the first thing he did is he said, I'm going to take my spirit from you and distribute it among 70 elders. And that's what he did. And Moses didn't complain about that. Moses didn't gripe. Moses was glad that that spirit was distributed so that Moses didn't have to bear the burden all by himself. Moses wasn't a leader in the sense that he bossed people around. Moses was a leader in the sense that he was doing what God told him to do. And so if God told you to go pick up a rock and move it to another place, and then you do it, that's just you doing what God's told you to do. If God tells you to go tell a person to do something, then you're just doing what you've been told to do. Technically, from a human perspective, we look at that and we say that's leadership and that's bossing people around. But it's not my will be done, it's God's will be done. And when it's godly leadership, it's never about what the person wants, what the individual wants. It's always about a discovery about what God wants. There's another lesson in this that I want you to learn. And that is that it is wrong always wrong, for people to take power or control away from other people that God has put in charge. Now our trouble is we don't know who those people are very often. But this isn't a rare thing. This happens in the Bible just as what in other places as well. For instance, after David has been anointed king, and he's still a boy, Saul is still the king in Israel. And Saul sets out to try to kill David. And he chases him all over the countryside. And David has several opportunities to kill Saul, but he won't do it. Because David says it is wrong to harm the Lord's anointed. Later, when one of David's sons tries to take the throne away from his father, David doesn't fight him over it. David leaves town and says, if God wants him to be king, then let God make him king. That attitude, the great humility displayed by Moses, who was the most humble man who ever lived. What happens as soon as Korah rebels against Moses? Does Moses go, shut up, Korah, and sit down? You idiot, I'm in charge here. No, that's not what Moses does. Moses falls on his face on the ground, doesn't he? We need to accept that same attitude. There are people that God has put in positions for reasons he understands, but we don't understand. If God calls you and me to a position of leadership, then we need to accept that responsibility with humility, and we need to carry out our functions as leaders.